Cory Booker is someone I look up to, someone I respect, and someone who inspires me. I know he's about to inspire you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you your commencement speaker for a speech I hope you will remember for all of your days and one day share with your children, Cory Anthony Booker.
If you guys knew how hard of a time and how much we give each other, tease each other relentlessly, you would be amazed with that introduction. It's one of those introductions that my dad would have enjoyed and my mom would have actually believed. But Drew is a special man, and the best thing I can say about him is a quote by James Baldwin, who said, "Children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them." Drew had an extraordinary dad and has imitated that incredible model, and I'm proud that his family has been so involved in this university. And I want to thank this university for giving me this incredible privilege. As Drew kind of indicated, I am the only United States senator that lives in an inner city community, in a low-income community, in a majority Black and brown community. And I love my neighborhood, I love my neighbors, I love my district. It is extraordinary. And I see folks who struggle. And in many ways, their struggle resonates with the very ideals of this university. Temple is a school that started the American way. It wasn't for the privileged or for the elite. It was for working students. In fact, when your founder began this university, he began the school teaching. He began teaching people that were working full-time jobs and wanted to study at night. This university has a tradition of understanding the dignity of work, that understands the redemptive power of struggle. This is a university that evidences the ideals of Booker T. Washington, who I studied as a college student, who said, "You do not judge the greatness of an individual by the positions they attained in life, but by how high they had to climb to get there." I look at this student body and I feel so privileged that you're giving me a chance to give you a brief message. And I want to say thank you to all the members of this university community who made this moment possible. In this arena, I want to give gratitude to parents and family members. I want to give gratitude to faculty and the incredible trustees. I want to give gratitude to those people who don't get the recognition that they deserve, the people that serve you meals, that clean the bathrooms that you use. This entire community is one worthy of gratitude and celebration today, and I say thank you. And so, I want to jump right in. If there's one thing I want you to remember is that the talk I want to give to you is just a reminder and an urgency that I see for you to recognize how powerful each and every one of you are. And I hope that at the end I've convinced you that you're more powerful than you may have realized. Now look, a lot of folks confuse what real power is. It's been a journey for me to try to understand what real power is. When I got this incredible honorary degree, and I will make John McCain, Patrick Leahy, and others call me doctor now on the Senate floor. Chuck Schumer will call me doctor. But when I heard all of those resume points being read out, I'm telling you right now, I have learned over my lifetime that what you put on your resume is not the power that you have. It's the agency power. It's not about the title you have or the position you hold. Let me give you an example. I was mayor of the city of Newark, and I was riding just high, lots of work, hard job, but I had this job that came with what I believed was real power. And I should have known better, because I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark, because some of those powerful people I met were the tenant president in the projects, the tenant organizer, some incredible folks who often are not perceived as powerful as they are. But here I was, the mayor of Newark, feeling great about myself, and I get this call one day that, of course, me being a mayor, I thought I should get. I got a call from a renowned professor from Harvard University named Henry Louis Gates, and he calls me up and he does what you often should do with politicians with big egos. You should stroke that ego a little bit. It might get you better relations. We see that in recent foreign policy too. And so Henry Louis Gates starts stroking my ego. He says, "Cory, did you know that I have a TV show called Finding Your Roots?" And I'm all excited. I'm thinking he's going to invite me to a screening of this Finding Your Roots. Some of you might know the show. He takes these celebrities, people like Oprah and Chris Rock, and traces their history. And I thought this was great. He's inviting me to a show. Of course, I'm the mayor. And he goes, "Cory, I have this show." I go, "I know about it, Professor Gates. I know about it." He goes, "Well, actually, I want you to be the subject of this show." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I hit the lottery. Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yes." He goes, "Cory, you're this up-and-coming politician. You've done this and done that." And I'm like, yes, please tell me more. And then all of a sudden, I remember that he pairs people together. And I say to him, hey, Skip, hey, Dr. Gates, who are you pairing me with? And he pauses, and then he says very slowly, "I'm pairing you with John Lewis." And many of you might not know who John Lewis is, but John Lewis is like this incredible icon in American history. He was one of these guys who was born poor, dirt poor in Alabama. My father would say he was born so poor he couldn't afford the other two letters. He was just Po. He was born a po boy. But John Lewis, at a very young age, at the age of many of you, leaves college, goes to Martin Luther King, joins the civil rights movement, becomes one of the big five leaders of the civil rights movement, leads sit-ins, leads freedom rides, leads marches. They let 5 people speak at the March on Washington. He's the last living member that spoke. If you Google him, you'll be amazed at this life. And here he's telling me that I'm going to be paired with John Lewis. And suddenly, I was not as happy as I was before. I'm suddenly humbled because I know how the show is going to start. It's going to start with your 2 biographies, mine and his. And as great as I thought I was because of my position and my power, I realized that it was no contest. And indeed, this is in essence how the show started. The speaker gets on and goes, "John Lewis, hero of the civil rights movement, standing on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He literally bled the southern soil red for freedom." And then it's my beginning. "Cory Booker, riding his big wheel in suburban New Jersey." Falls off, skins his knee, runs home to his beautiful 3-bedroom home, crying to his mama. It was a powerfully humbling moment. Now, a few years later, I would go to the United States Senate, and I had one of those hard moments, and I know all of us have here experienced some loss. My dad died 6 days before I would be elected to the United States Senate. And I went down. It was a special election, so my dad dies in October. I'm going to be sworn in October, and my mom and I were hurting, grieving, but yet here I was becoming America's 4th popularly elected African American to the Senate. It was this moment, and so my mom and my staff, they realized, well, maybe right before I go to Joe Biden and get sworn in, let's fill this hole and this hurt with a titan. And we go see John Lewis, and we go to his office, and he has prepared a breakfast spread. You walk into this man's office, first of all, it looks like a civil rights museum, except he's in every picture. But here I knew this man from afar, from his resume, from his titles, but as soon as I met him, I was so struck by his humility, by his kindness. My mom has this saying, taken from an Emerson quote. She says, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say." He had this spirit about him, this gracefulness. He wouldn't even let my mom and I get up and go back to the buffet for some more grits and eggs. He literally, this Titan, my hero, is serving me food. And then he tries to impart to me what it means to him to see me today take my oath of office. Well, it was over at that point. We leave his office. Now we're going from one side of the Capitol to the other to go to the floor of the Senate to be sworn in by Joe Biden. But I don't know, somebody needs to fact check this, because I think this is the first and only time in American history that a United States senator was walking to be sworn in, and the entire way their mother is lecturing them like crazy. My mom has now just been to see John. She is lit, she is on fire. She's like, boy, don't you forget where you came from. Don't forget the struggle and the sacrifice. She's getting me the whole way. Boy, people had to die for you to be here. They bled for you. And finally, as I'm about to leave, she's like, boy, don't forget that the title does not make the man. The man has got to make the title. And then I look at my mom. I look at my mom and I'm like, Mom, this is not the last time in your life you will see me. I'll be back for the reception later. But that's the point. The title does not make the woman. The woman, the man must make the title. We get so caught up sometimes in mistaking what power is. We confuse celebrity with significance. We confuse wealth with worth. We confuse charisma with character. We live in a society that puts value too often on things that in the end don't matter. And what I want to try to impress upon you right now is, as you go charging out in life and fill up your resume year after year with the outward-facing things of life, I want you to understand where your power is generated is not by what you do, but by who you are. There is this power. John Lewis exhibited it. I've gotten to know him now. We sit around a table in the Congressional Black Caucus. I find myself being influenced more by who this man is than the things I read about him in the history book. He's a guy that evidences a value I have, that someone who is nice to you but rude to the waiter is not a nice person. He's somebody that has taught me in this era where there's so much fighting and yelling that you actually don't have to attend every argument that you're invited to. He's a guy that has taught me by his example that patriotism is love of country, but you cannot love your country unless you love your countrymen and women. And that ultimately, that the greatest leaders are not those that lead with great oratory or lead with great power. The greatest leaders are those who very simply always lead with love. And so this is the message. There's a story about Gandhi that I love. It may just be apocryphal, but he's sitting in his tent. People are visiting him and asking him questions and advice, and he's taking a long receiving line, and this woman walks in with her child, and she walks to, after waiting in the hot sun, she walks up to Gandhi and says, Mahatma, please, would you tell my child to stop eating sugar? You emphasize dietary discipline. My son is getting sick with all the sugar he eats. Would you tell him to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi looks at her kindly and with compassion, then looks at the boy, then looks back at her and just says, no, I won't. And she seems disturbed and frustrated, but he goes, you know what? Come back in 2 months. She's confused and disappointed, but this is Gandhi who just spoke to her, so she leaves the tent. 2 months pass. She waits in this long line again. She finally gets in to see him, and she says, Gandhi, please, very respectfully, my son, his health is not good. He has a terrible eating habits. Would you please tell him to stop eating sugar? And this time Gandhi stands up looks at the woman with love and compassion, then looks at the boy and now walks over to the boy, puts his hand on the boy's shoulder and says, "My son, you must stop eating sugar." And at that moment, the boy looks like he's been affected by Gandhi. The mother's pleased. She now thinks he'll listen, and she says, thank you, and starts to leave the tent, but then she stops, turns around and says, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but why didn't you tell my son to stop eating sugar 2 months ago? And Gandhi looked almost bemused by the question, and he goes, simply because 2 months ago, I was eating sugar. It was Pablo Coelho that said very simply that the world is changed by your example, not your opinion. I cannot tell you the power I have seen by people who don't preach their values but live them. I have a saying, before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me in how you treat other people. And here we have this nation. Here we have this nation where we stand together and we sing songs. We put our hand over our hearts and we swear oaths, almost when not realizing it, pledging ourselves to ideals like liberty and justice for all. But yet we're a society that professes to favor liberty, and yet we have the largest prison population on the planet Earth, where we put children in solitary confinement before they're even having their trials. I could go on and on about the incongruencies between who we say we are and who we are, but that's actually not the point. The point is not about what's going on outside in the world, but what's going on in your heart. What are you choosing to do on a daily basis to manifest your truth? And this is the story I want to end with to that point. If I could convince you that you can change this world, not by what you do tomorrow or next month or the job you get or the title you hold or the office you're elected to, I can convince you that every day you have an opportunity to tell your truth, to let it resonate out into the world, to recognize that we're all connected in ways we don't understand. I mean, there's a Stanford professor that I love. He's a director of the Stanford Social Neuroscience Lab, is actually studying the power of our actions on a daily basis. He tells studies that show that one act of kindness can go viral, that it could cascade, that our attitude in any given day affects people 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation, but it isn't just in the present. And this is the story I want to leave you with. My family moved into an all-white neighborhood in northern New Jersey in 1969. In fact, my parents, when they would go look at houses in this neighborhood, they would be told they were sold. And so they found this group of activists in the Fair Housing Council, this woman who was head of the Fair Housing Council named Miss Lee Porter, and it was amazing. They decided to reach out to some lawyers, and they set up a sting operation that every time my parents would go look at a house in the northern suburbs and be told it was sold, a white couple would come, and the white couple inevitably would find the house still for sale. Well, one day my parents found the house that I grew up in, and they loved the home, but they were told it was sold. And so the white couple comes and finds out that the house is still for sale. And they put a bid on the house, a proxy bid, like with the bid, the number that my parents would have bid, and the bid was accepted. Papers were drawn up. And on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. And my father and this lawyer walk into the office, confront the real estate agent, and the real estate agent doesn't capitulate. He actually gets angry. He stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And then he sigs a dog on my dad. Now, you guys find that incredible, but trust me, as I was growing up, every time my dad would tell the story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, I'm a teenager with teenage swagger, and my father's like, boy, don't you walk around here like that. I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. I become a senator. I decide, like many senators with high sense of self-regard, to write a book. But if you have a father like mine, you gotta fact check all your stories from your childhood if you're gonna write about them. I had to find out, how big was the dog? And so I try to find the head of the Fair Housing Council from the 1960s. She was easy to find because she is still head of the Fair Housing Council today. Her name is Miss Lee Porter. She is 92 years old. She's not in a history book. She's not in the news. But now she doesn't help black families, she helps same-sex couples and Muslim families who are facing housing discrimination. I bring her to my office and I felt a sense of shame I hope you never feel. Because all of us have people we should say thank you to, and here's a woman who literally got me into a community that I grew up in, and I never said thank you. I got on my knees in front of her and I was talking to her and I said, I need to know these lawyers. Who were they? Can I find them? The lawyer that took the punch for my family, she said, had passed away, and I felt again that sense of shame that I never thanked the man who took a punch for my family. But she said, Cory, the lawyer that organized all of the lawyers, you can find him. His name is Arthur Lessman. And I call him up, and I find him, and I talk to him on the phone, and this is the powerful point. He confirms everything. It wasn't a pack of wolves, it was just a dog. And after he gives me all the facts, I ask the question, why? Why would you, in the 1960s, a white guy who was just starting a business, who was busy as you can be in a startup, just a startup law firm, was struggling to provide for his family, why would he decide to represent black families coming into his neighborhood? And he said, Cory, I remember the moment I made the decision. And I said, well, what happened? And he goes, Cory, I was sitting at home, comfortable on my couch, watching the news, and there it was. A movie broke into the news, and I watched suddenly that there were these people that started in Selma, Alabama, and were trying to march to Montgomery, and they get stopped on this bridge called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And there, this crowd of people, one of whom was John Lewis, they get confronted by Alabama state troopers, and they're told to turn around, and they decided on that bridge that they would kneel down and pray before they turned around. But just as they're kneeling to pray, the Alabama state troopers with horses and tear gas and billy clubs charged into the marchers and beat them, cracking heads open. John Lewis had his head cracked open on that day. He said, I was watching, it was a horrifying scene. And at that moment, instead of doing what so many people do, getting caught up in a state of sedentary agitation, when you're upset about what's going on in the world but don't do anything about it, where you allow your inability to do everything to undermine your determination to do something that is resonant with your values, he said he went to work the next day and told his partner, Leo, we got to go to Alabama. And his partner laughed at him, not because it was funny, but because it was preposterous. They could not afford a ticket. And so they just sat there for a little bit and decided that they would do the best they could with what they had, where they were. And they started calling around and looking for people that might need a little bit of legal help, and they found a young woman named Miss Lee Porter. Now, I bring this up to end with this point. Martin Luther King said that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. Neuroscience research shows that just one act of kindness reverberates throughout that common garment, reverberates throughout that network. Here is a bunch of folks on a bridge in Alabama that just that one day of standing up and marching, and they didn't even succeed on that day, but just that one day of showing patriotism, that one day of showing love, that energy burst forth and leapt 1,000 miles instantaneously and changed the heart of a man sitting on a couch in New Jersey. And then instantaneously, he decides to get involved and starts working with a lawyer and changes the outcome for generations not yet born. This is the power we all have every day of our life to choose to live life in accordance with our values. And to me, if you exercise your power in that way, then you can be like the stars in the sky. I stood with an astrophysicist, a man named Neil deGrasse Tyson, backstage before a podcast, and I asked him, I said, is it true that the stars in the sky are millions and millions of light years away? And he said, yes, it is. And I go, isn't it true that some of that light takes millions of years to reach us? And he goes, yeah, roughly, Cory, that's true. And I said, that means that some of the stars we're seeing, as if they're there, they died a long time ago. And he goes, absolutely. Well, graduates of 2018, this is the truth of life. Each one of you holds the potential every moment to give off your light, to be brilliant, to be luminescent in every moment, from the kindness you extend to a stranger, to how you engage with somebody with differing views, to the act of generosity. Every moment you have a chance to manifest your light, to show your power, to make a difference, to add or detract from this moral moment we live in right now. I say to you, class of 2018, you are powerful now. And my prayer for you is that every day of your life, you manifest that light, that brilliance, that hope, that promise. And if you do, I know in my heart, like it is for Drew's dad who's dead and gone, my father who's lost, that you will live a life so bright and so brilliant that generations yet unborn will bathe in your warmth, your light, and your hope. Thank you and congratulations. Thank you.